Taiwan's cost of living is rising and consumer price index soars to its highest level in 14 years. Taiwanese activists protest Tokyo's plans to dump nuclear wastewater into the Pacific Ocean. The story of sheep and wolves, 5 children's books authors go on trial in Hong Kong accused of inciting hatred of China. And intelligence heads in the US and UK sound the alarm over Chinese espionage. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Ethan Liu. We begin today with the rising cost of living here in Taiwan. The consumer price index rose by 3.59% in June compared to a year earlier. It's now at the highest level since September 2008. As Louis Watt reports, the cost of goods and services has been pushed up by food.
In Taiwan, the weekly supermarket trip has become noticeably more expensive. Even the price of cabbage has tripled, leaving a bitter taste in the mouth. Food has pushed up the cost of living in Taiwan. The country's consumer price index rose by 3.59% in June. That's the highest level in almost 14 years, and above market expectations. The main opposition party, the KMT, says that rising prices will be hard on Taiwan's nearly 600,000 low and middle income households.
他们平常就靠政府补助或者是打零工过活，他们的收入非常的微薄，而这些人一旦他的一日三餐这一些外食费也通通都涨，他过的就是缩衣节食的生活。
Inflation led the central bank in June to cut its growth outlook for Taiwan's economy this year to 3.75%. But Taiwan's economy is being supported by global demand for semiconductors, and the government has said it will consider further price stabilization measures, which doesn't help consumers here in the short term, who are hoping their food prices will soon go back down again. Karma Xu and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan has recorded its first 2 domestic cases of the Omicron BA.5 subvariant of COVID-19, but officials say there's no sign it has spread into the community. The strain is more contagious than previous variants and is better able to evade immunity from vaccines and past infections. The 2 infected people are family members. They caught the virus after driving relatives who'd returned from the U.S. home from the airport. Everyone in the car wore a mask for the entire trip, but officials say the virus spread because the windows were closed. Despite the discovery of the new variant, Taiwan has announced plans to nearly double its weekly international arrival quota to 40,000. Protesters gathered outside the de-facto Japan embassy in Taipei to denounce Tokyo's plan to dump nuclear wastewater into the sea. Japan is set to release over 1 million tons of treated radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant next year. Bing Wang has the report.
Environmental activists present their demands to Japan's de facto embassy in Taipei. These activists frequently protest over Taiwan's territorial disputes with Japan. But now they're handing Tokyo's de facto embassy in Taipei a list of very different concerns.
也要借鉴这个机会来呼吁日本政府审慎地评估明年要排放核废水的计划。
In April of 2021, Japan announced it would dump over 1 million tons of water from the Fukushima nuclear plant. The power plant was damaged in the 2011 tsunami and set off a nuclear disaster. Countries all over the world placed bans on Fukushima imports, including Taiwan.
Fukushima food imports were banned for 10 years in Taiwan due to concerns over radiation. But in February, the government changed their stance because they wanted closer ties with Japan and they believed that the food was safe.
Local consumers are still skeptical of the government's decision. Now that Japan is set to release wastewater from Fukushima into the ocean, it's again drawing global condemnation from governments and environmental groups. Tokyo maintains that the wastewater will be treated before disposal, and it won't be harmful to humans or marine life. But many aren't convinced.
日本的宫城县跟福岛县有民间团体啊，有达成了18万份的联署给日本东京电力公司，他们也是严重的质疑这个。然后，所以我们是认为在不管是日本国内还是包括我们国外，有没有大家都还有疑虑的状况下，所以我希望日本政府能更审慎的评估。
The Japanese government says they consulted with other countries in the region, and their plan is also endorsed by the International Atomic Energy Agency. But these activists won't be swayed, and they intend to keep protesting until Japan changes their plan. Rick He, Pichi Zhuang, and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
Hong Kong has become the latest Chinese territory to destroy a shipment of Taiwanese mangoes. City officials say they detected COVID-19 on one of the fruits and destroyed 200 kilograms of mangoes in the same batch. On Saturday, Macau banned Taiwan mango imports from 2 companies for a week, also over COVID concerns. Agriculture officials say neither territory has provided evidence of their claims. U.S. and U.K. intelligence officials have held an unprecedented joint appearance to warn of the threat posed by China and its espionage campaigns. The head of the MI5 and the FBI outlined a range of concerns, including the consequences of an invasion of Taiwan. Jaime Okan reports.
It's the first time intelligence officials from the U.S. and the U.K. are side by side, giving a joint statement. Speaking before business leaders in London, the heads of MI5 and the FBI outlined what they've concluded is the greatest threat to the stability of the current world order.
We consistently see that it's the Chinese government that poses the biggest long-term threat to our economic and national security. And by our, I mean both of our nations along with our allies in Europe and elsewhere.
UK security officials urged companies seeking to do business with China to be wary of the consequences, expressing their concern that Beijing's intentions might not be what they seem.
The widespread Western assumption that growing prosperity within China and increasing connectivity with the West would automatically lead to greater political freedom has, I'm afraid, been shown to be plain wrong. But the Chinese Communist Party is interested in our democratic, media and legal systems, not to emulate them, sadly, but to use them for its gain.
U.S. cybersecurity experts say that last year, China was responsible for almost 2/3 of all state-sponsored cyber attacks. And according to the intelligence chiefs, this trend is putting many companies and organizations at risk.
The Chinese government is set on stealing your technology, whatever it is that makes your industry tick, and using it to undercut your business and dominate your market.
But China's domination might not stop in the markets. The intelligence chief said their findings show that China's been looking to insulate its economy against potential sanctions from the West should it try to invade Taiwan. China has never considered Taiwan a country and has vowed to bring the island under its control by force if necessary. In turn, Taiwan has continued to bolster its combat readiness and recently unveiled new jet trainers to better prepare its military pilots for possible conflict. The unprecedented joint statement by the intelligence chiefs highlighted the importance of allies working together in confronting a rising power like China.
All of us in America, in the UK, and across the free world are in this together, and together we're an awfully formidable team.
The chiefs concluded that if China were to invade Taiwan, it could be, quote, one of the worst business disruptions the world has seen. And as these two Western nations assert their commitment to their allies, they hope to keep China from challenging the status quo. James Rayner and Jaime Okan for TaiwanPlus.
China's Wang Yi is launching his Southeast Asia tour in Bali, where he's attending the G20 foreign ministers meeting. His tour of the region includes stops in Myanmar, Thailand, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Indonesia. After returning to China, he will also had a series of meetings with Southeast Asian diplomats. It is seen as China's push to reassert its relations and ties with countries involved in its Belt and Road Initiative. So, what does this diplomatic blitz mean for Taiwan and its own overture to the region, known as the new Southbound policy? To find out more, our reporter John Van Trist spoke to Dr. Sana Hashmi, an expert in Taiwanese and Chinese foreign affairs.
Could you introduce or summarize the new Southbound policy and its objectives for people who may not be familiar with it?
So new Southbound policy is Taiwan's framework for reaching out to Southeast South Asia, and Australia and New Zealand. So this is actually a new policy that was started in 2016 after DPP came to power. So it's regarded as Taiwan's flagship foreign policy to engage, to reach out to the countries of the region, as I've mentioned.
And it's been about 6 years now since the policy began. What sorts of achievements has the policy had?
I always believe that it's too short of a period to judge a policy. But I think there are efforts to engage the countries of the region. Taiwan is really trying to engage through people-to-people ties. Specifically, if you look at with some of the Southeast Asian countries and even with India, you would realize that there is more people-to-people engagement between the two countries. People in the new Southbound policy countries are actually talking about Taiwan in a meaningful way, not just about cross-strait relation tensions with China.
Now, China's foreign minister is currently on a whirlwind tour of Southeast Asia. What impact do you think this will have on Taiwan's efforts to reach out to the region, if any? And should Taiwan respond in some way?
I think Taiwan has something that China is not doing, is reaching out to the people, is reaching out to the business community. So there is mutual benefit, be it COVID-19 pandemic or be it economic relationships. So I think there is no threat in kind of engaging Taiwan if you just keep the China factor aside. Even with economically engaging Taiwan, these countries, especially in Southeast Asian region, they have benefited immensely from engaging with Taiwan. From the 1990s till now, you would see that how Taiwanese businesses are going to Southeast Asia, how they're trying to pull out of China, and how they're investing in Southeast Asian countries. So I think this is only going to grow, and Southeast Asian countries have benefited from that. So I think we have to look at what are the areas that are non-controversial and what are the areas that are mutually beneficial. So China talks about win-win cooperation, but I think there is hardly any win-win cooperation with China and Southeast Asian cooperation. But when we talk about Taiwan and Southeast Asia, there's definitely this win-win cooperation.
Now, you said that it's too early to judge the policy because it's only been in place for 6 years. But is there something that the government could point to say, look, this has had some results?
So there are efforts to reach out to the countries, but it also depends on how receptive the countries of the region are. If you look at it, most of these countries have, if not confrontational relationship, they have differences with China, but at the same time, they are also trying to manage tensions with China. So I think there is a direct link between how they perceive Taiwan and how their relationship with China is.
Coming up, holding up a mirror to Taiwanese society, we look at the latest domestic movies on show at the Taipei Film Festival.
这是我们台湾人要送给台湾的礼物。
我们都清楚，我们都在一起，在完成一件事情。
这是我们的根。
Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus. For more great stories from Taiwan and around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Ethan Liu. Now let's take a look at some of the international news in brief. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says new weapons are helping to counter the Russian invasion. In his nightly address, he said the artillery provided by Western countries allows them to more accurately target Russian logistics. The country's military on Wednesday said they had pushed back Russian attacks in embattled eastern Ukraine. Authorities also rejected claims that Russia now has control of the entire Luhansk region and said the invaders were suffering significant losses in that area. North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un is holding an unprecedented conference aimed at boosting the ruling party's monolithic grip on the country. State media says the meeting is focusing the Party Life Guidance, or PLG. These are powerful organizations that police the loyalty of party members across the country. According to the U.S.-based Committee for Human Rights, the PLG's techniques often include self-criticism sessions where participants are forced to confess their wrongdoings. A series of children's books about wolves and sheep is at the center of a trial in Hong Kong involving 5 speech therapists. They have been charged under the colonial-era sedition law, with prosecutors accusing them of using it as a parable of Hong Kong and China to incite hatred. All 5 have pleaded not guilty. Ryan Ho Kilpatrick reports on the case.
The 12 Warriors of Sheep Village tells the story of 12 sheep escaping persecution, only to be detained in the wolves' village. It's one of the books that have landed a group of Hong Kong speech therapists on trial for sedition. Prosecutors say it's a parable of the 12 protesters who tried to flee to Taiwan by sea, but were intercepted by Chinese authorities.
同我捉晒佢哋返浪村咯。大船上面嘅船長大聲咁講。
5 leading members of the General Union of Hong Kong Speech Therapists are in court this week over a series of picture books. The government accuses them of using the illustrations to incite hatred and spread separatist ideas. The children's books tell the tale of a village of sheep threatened by evil wolves who blindly worship their leader, and can be interpreted to depict Hong Kong's situation.
It just displays and illustrates how the Hong Kong and Chinese government are afraid of people in bringing up these memories, in bringing up these events that actually took place. I think a lot of people were being inspired by the solidarity of the working people in fighting for democracy and the power of it in paralyzing the economy in a way that it would put pressure on the regime in making genuine reforms.
The trial has shone a light on both the issues of censorship and the government's intensifying crackdown on organized labor. Scores of new unions sprung out of the anti-government protests of 2019. But according to a report by the Hong Kong Labour Rights Monitor, over 60 have already been forced to disband.
They were being forced to disband themselves because of political threats and risks and pressure being put upon them by the Hong Kong and Chinese governments and authorities. As a result of the crackdown on the suppressions of the union, we're seeing that not only the political rights of the workers are being violated, but we are also seeing the workers' rights are being under threat as well.
Hong Kong's history of labour movements is long and storied, stretching back to seamen strikes that crippled the then British colony in the early 20th century. Some of the laws, resurrected by the current Hong Kong government to jail its opponents, were created by the British colonial authorities to quash these earlier strikes. The anti-sedition law being levelled at the authors of these books is one such example. And in the national security crackdown, it's not just smaller unions like the speech therapists being targeted. Last year, 2 of the biggest and most well-established unions in the city, the Professional Teachers Union and the Confederation of Trade Unions, were also dissolved due to political pressure.
It is very difficult for many unions to continue to operate freely and without any political pressure in organizing workers, in participating in political events or social movements, and a lot of the unions themselves are being questioned by the authorities or interrogated of the activities that they have been involving in. The Hong Kong government is trying to use some of the draconian stipulations within the labor law and the trade unions ordinance in limiting the activities of the unions.
The case of the speech therapist has been adjourned until mid-July. The charges they face under the colonial-era crimes ordinance carry a maximum penalty of 2 years in jail. But the defendants have already spent almost a year in pretrial detention, denied bail on national security grounds. Those concerned for the future of unions and free speech in the city will be watching what becomes of the tale of Sheep Village. Ryan Hill-Kilpatrick for TaiwanPlus.
Anti-government protesters have taken to the streets in Sri Lanka for what they're calling their final push to topple the government of Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Police used tear gas and water cannon to disperse hundreds of protesters who'd gathered near the parliament building in Colombo. Sri Lanka is facing a crippling economic crisis. There are severe food, power, and fuel shortages, and doctors say the health system is about to collapse. 2 people were killed and 4 were missing in northern India on Wednesday after heavy rain triggered flash floods. The downpours brought parts of the country's economic capital Mumbai to a standstill with flooded streets. Heavy rains have also affected other parts of the subcontinent. 3 days of monsoon rains have killed at least 17 people and damaged dozens of homes across southwest Pakistan. Taiwan's Museum of World Religions' new exhibition is giving visitors an immersive opportunity to explore life and death. Called Brightest Night, Darkest Day, A Walk with the Death, the exhibit takes guests on a journey through life and into what might way beyond through the perspective of different religions. The museum's director says the experience will make guests reflect on their inner selves.
我们要探讨的是人为什么会畏惧死亡？好，那究竟是怕死亡的这种带来的意外，还是你不知道你死了之后会去哪里？
The Taipei Film Festival has become an important test ground for both commercial and experimental movies. This year, a range of diverse themes is hitting the screens. Our reporter Yu Jinhuang looks at some of what's on offer and how it's affecting Taiwanese society.
The opening feature of this year's Taipei Film Festival is not the typical blockbuster. Mama Boy centers on a shy 29-year-old man who still lives with his mother and has a late start to his love life, a situation that many Taiwanese can relate to.
因为国片的制作的成本跟整个技术状况呢，你不一定能够去好莱坞去比。那台湾这边本土制造电影有自己的一个本土议题的情感上的抒发需求，那这个部分是好莱坞电影是无法比拟的。
In terms of domestic films, Taiwanese like to watch melodramas, gangster movies, and thrillers. But in the early days of the industry, the martial law government of the time supported films that portrayed Chinese culture as superior to anything Taiwanese, in an effort to suppress a separate national consciousness. That changed after a cultural movement in the 1990s.
Our Taiwanese people started to look at our own culture in a positive light and to cherish what we have and what have made us who we are. And in films, the local elements are now embraced.
2 other popular films at the film festival touch on gender-based issues. One focuses on power imbalance in relationships and sexual violations, and the other film revolves around female sexuality in the teenage years. Neither film makes a judgment based on traditional values, challenging audiences to make up their own minds.
我觉得影展它本身就是应该扮演这样子一个角色，它 应该要可以去为观众去寻找到一个值得被关注的电影，或者是值得被关注的一种创作的方法或者是趋势，然后把它带到我们的舞台上，然后带到我们的荧幕上，呈现给观众，然后也刺激观众去思考。
Before LGBTQ rights were enshrined in Taiwan and same-sex marriage was legalized, the conversations around them were featured in festival films, which then moved the dialogue forward. So going by this year's lineup, it seems just a matter of time before true gender equality jumps off the screen and becomes reality. Piper Yu and Eugene Huang for TaiwanPlus.
A company in the United States has used artificial intelligence to design a high-performance supercar that could be the next step in auto evolution.
So just like nature optimizes for material and energy, and you see these organic structures that emerge, that's the same thing we've done here, but in metal structures. And instead of taking millions of years to iterate and find that efficiency point, we've taken minutes. So in the end, we're not designing these to look organic, bone-like, biological. They just actually look biological because biological is efficient, and these structures are perfectly efficient.
The company used AI to develop much of the car with a process that mimics biological evolution on a much shorter time scale. The result is the Model 21C, a hybrid electric vehicle with a 3D printed structure. The vehicle has a top speed of 400 kilometers per hour and can go from 0 to 100 in just 1.9 seconds. The developers expect their method to spread to other industries such as defense and aerospace. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Ethan Liu. Finally, we leave you with images of activists in dinosaur costumes protesting against bullfighting ahead of Spain's San Fermin Festival. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.